Hello, welcome to First Page Fridays. I'm April Davila with Sit Right Here, and in these videos, we are looking at the first page of somebody's story, and I'm doing a live recording of the edit that I do of them, just so that we can all learn along with that writer for the things that are working well and the things that they might need to tweak or work on before we call the piece a finished piece. So we're going to start from the top. I haven't even looked at this piece yet. I'm going to read it through and then we're going to jump into editing. Don't forget to like and subscribe for my newsletter. You can also, if there's a link, there's a link below this video where you can submit your first page if you would like a free first page edit. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So first thing we do is just read it through. Jesse could hear Mike rushing around the house, gathering what he needed for his shopping trip to Berkeley. Jesse, we need to talk before I go. I need to tell you what Tess said last night. He paused. Of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. Damn, Mike, she's so irritating when she does that. She knows we don't keep secrets. I'll be there in a couple of minutes, Mike yelled as he ran back downstairs to his office. Jesse thought about how Tessa's attempts to keep secrets from her started. It was all depression's fault. When Tess was in high school, she was taking a class focused on human development. She curled up with me on the couch after school one day and said, Mama, what was I like as a baby? We were learning about baby's temperament today in class, and I wondered what mine was like as a baby. I honestly said, your father would be a better one to ask. He was always taking care of you while I was in the hospital. She looked at me in shock. Mama, why were you in the hospital? What happened? I put my arm around her and said, right after you were born, I got what's called postpartum depression, meaning I got severely depressed. I was so depressed I wasn't able to care for you for a few months, and I stayed in a hospital for the first 2 months of your life. All right, so this is, I'm just in terms of genre, I'm guessing it's either literary fiction or memoir. Let's see here. So we have a few main characters. So one of the things to consider in your first page is keeping your number of characters low, 2, maybe 3. And I think this does this well because really we've got Jesse and Mike, and then we have talking about Tess, and then we actually get to Tess. So let's go ahead and start at the top here. Jesse could hear Mike rushing around the house, gathering what he needed for his shopping trip to Berkeley. Okay, so just for me, because Mike is, or sorry, Mike is pretty generally can be assumed to be a man, but Jesse really could be either way. So the pronoun here of he really could refer to either Jesse or Mike. And let's see, but okay, but in grammatically, this he would be Mike. So Jesse could hear Mike rushing around the house, gathering what Mike, needed for his shopping trip to Berkeley. So this is nice because it's putting us somewhere in Northern California. If he's taking a shopping trip to Berkeley, I'm going to assume they're not in Berkeley proper. I'm curious what he's shopping for that he needs to go to Berkeley. Hopefully that will be revealed. It's okay if it is in the first line here. And then Jesse, we need to talk before I go. I need to tell you what Tess said last night. He paused. Of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. So I would probably set this apart. Dialogue's tricky, right? Less is always more when it comes to dialogue. And in this, on the first page, it's even more so. So I would probably go ahead and say, I need to tell you what Tess said last night. And since he's running around, you would want to kind of indicate like, okay, he's rushing around the house gathering what he needs, right? I need to tell you what Tess said last night. His voice came from the other room. Then he paused. Of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. And as always, I'll just reiterate, I am not a copy editor. I'm a line and developmental editor. So things like, should this be a comma or period? I'm pretty sure it's period, but that part is not what we're doing here. We're going to work more on the larger ideas. So you'd still want to hire a copy editor on this one, but he says, I need to tell you what Tess said last night. His voice came from the other room. Then he paused. Of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. Now, I wonder if you need exclamation points. Like, I guess you're indicating that he's yelling, but exclamation points are generally an indication of excitement or enthusiasm, right? I guess they could be both. But if this is just to say yelling, I would probably say, I need to tell you what Tess said last night. His voice came from the other room, or you could say like he yelled from the other room and then paused. That might even be better. he yelled from the other room. And then this would be a comma. I need to tell you what Tess said last night, he yelled from the other room. Then he paused. Of course, I'm not supposed to tell you. So even just getting one of them down, but I wonder too if this could be a period instead of an exclamation. It affects the tone. So if you keep an exclamation, it's more of like, of course, I'm not supposed to tell you, versus, of course, I'm not supposed to tell you, but loudly from the other room, right? So that's artistic choice, of course, at that point. So I'll leave that one. Damn, Mike, she's so irritating when she does that. So we're transitioning to another speaker here. So it might be worth like kind of bringing us back to Jesse, because it seems like we're with Jesse here. Jesse is hearing Mike running around, yelling things. So then Jesse stopped what he was doing, or I would even be specific, like he stopped peeling bananas. I have to make things up because I don't know what the story actually is, so I'm just going to make something up here. Jesse stopped peeling bananas for his smoothie. Why not? And yelled back at Mike. Okay, again, this isn't great, but you get the idea of like bringing the reader back to Jesse, right? So Jesse's hearing Mike rushing around. We hear Mike yell something, and then Jesse stops peeling or stops packing their bag, or Jesse stops working on their accounting. Whatever Jesse's doing, but this helps ground us in the scene. Jesse stopped what he was doing or she was doing and yelled back at Mike. Now, ideally, at this point, I would love for you to find some way to give us a hint on whether Jesse is male or female. I mean, I guess when we get down here, Jesse is thinking about Tess' attempts to keep secrets from her. Oh, okay. So we do confirm, and then we also get that that Jesse is the mama. It would be nice if you could get that right up front. Like maybe you could give Jessie something to do that would indicate, like maybe she's brushing her long hair. Not that men can't have long hair, but you can start to like lay in some assumptions that people might make about gender. If you can find a way to do that, that would be great. You also have opportunity here. Like one of the reasons my brain went to bananas for smoothies is that like, okay, if they're in Northern California living near Berkeley, you can like, if you instead had Jessie like cleaning her gun, it's a different kind of character and maybe not one who lives near Berkeley. So you can choose activities that kind of hint at geography too, because and again, you're playing into stereotypes a little bit as you're starting to introduce characters, and you can find things that are unique and not necessarily cliche. But think about ways that you can tell us more about where the characters are, who they are, what do they look like. I'll be there in a couple of minutes, Mike yelled as he ran back downstairs to his office. So I'm a little unclear on Mike's geography here. So he's still yelling, but then he runs back downstairs. So was he not downstairs already? So I would change this a little bit to be like Mike said as he ran through the room and went downstairs to his office. Like just clarify the geography of this a little bit. Mike said said as he breezed through the room and went back downstairs to his office. Yeah, I like the specificity of the office. Like he's going, it's a home office. You're starting to get a few details. Jesse thought about how Tessa's attempts to keep secrets from her started. It was all depression's fault. Now, Tessa's attempts to keep secrets from her kind of goes against this idea of like she knows we don't keep secrets, right? So if she's really trying to keep a secret, she would not have told Mike, presumably Dad, about this. And so this feels like just like half a step off from a solid landing here. Jesse thought about how Tessa's attempts to keep secrets from her started. And also, okay, so when Tess was in school, I'm assuming that And also, you almost never want to use exclamation points in your prose. Generally speaking, save them for dialogue, because otherwise it's hard. Like, it was all depression's fault. Like, it's that's not really an exclamation, or maybe it is. Maybe that's how you intended it. But as it reads like a segue into a description of how Tess started keeping secrets, which doesn't quite play out, right? This section that follows this is not really about Tess attempting to keep secrets. So there's a little, it's like it almost connects, but it doesn't quite land. So I think you might want to, if you really are going to segue into how Tess first started attempting to keep secrets, you probably need a different story to like after this sentence to segue into. If you're going to keep this as the next part of the story, I think you need a different segue. And since I have to work with what you've got here, I'm going to make it a segue into this section. So when Tess was in high school, she was taking a class focused on human development. So, and she's asking about what she was like as a baby, and we're getting to the first discussion of postpartum depression. So I think I would go with Jessie thought about the first time she told Tess about her depression. But then even that's not great, because why does she think about this given what their conversation here they're having? I'm not supposed to tell you. She's so irritating when she does that. Jessie thought about the first time what would you say here? That she explained to her. I'm having trouble connecting this idea of secrets to learning about postpartum depression. So we may have to adjust that a little bit. So to move on from this, I'm just going to say we need a transition here. So Jessie thought about the first time she told Tess about her depression. Again, we'd need something to spark that memory. Yeah, I know this may not be the best transition. I would say maybe go with something like, you could even say, like, tell us how old Tess is. That might be a transition. Like, Tess was old enough now but Jessie remembered the first time they talked about, and I would say, depression. Again, it kind of depends on where you're going with all of this. But we'll skip over that transition for now. When Tess was in high school, she was taking a class focused on human development. She curled up with me. Okay, so we have a POV shift here. She curled up with, see, but now I'm wondering if Jessie, if our narrator, if it's actually a first person narrator. Oh, no, I'm going to assume that Jessie, it sounds like Jessie is the narrator. So I'm going to say with Jessie on the couch after school one day and said, Mama, what was I like as a baby? We were learning. And so again, now we get it again. Dialogue is tricky, but we get into voice here. Mama, what was I like as a baby? Sounds like a pretty young person question. I would, if you want to hint at her being, she's in high school. Well, is she in high school? She's at school. This would be a good detail to give us. Is it high school, elementary school, fifth grade, kindergarten? Like, you could give us a sense. So since this is, maybe I made the assumption of high school. Doesn't say that. And this sounds like a younger kid. So I'm changing my assumption to be younger. Mama, what was I like as a baby? We were learning about baby's temperament today in class. I think this is why I thought older kid, because even that word, baby's temperament today in class. And I wondered what mine was like as a baby. Sounds more like a teenager voice. So to keep it younger, I would just say, what was I like as a baby? And I honestly said, your father would be a better one to ask. He was always taking care of you while I was in the hospital. She looked at me in shock. And again, don't need exclamation point. So whenever you put an exclamation point into the prose, it's usually a sign that like your writing needs to do more work to build that excitement. So she looked at me in shock. Mama, why were you in the hospital? What happened? I put my arm around her, and again, this is reading younger, so yeah, I'm going to assume younger, but let's say after, I'm going to put in grade school. All right, let's say, how about, we'll even be specific, after second grade, or, okay, that's awkward. So I would say on the couch one day after school in second grade, getting a few of those details in, and said, Mama, what was I like as a baby? And I honestly said, your father would be a better one to ask. Also, you don't really need the honestly. And I said, and we don't have any reason to think this character is a liar, so we don't really need to justify what they're saying is true. Your father would be a better one to ask. He was always taking care of you while I was in the hospital. So this would imply that she was in the hospital for a long time if he was always taking care of her. So that's, and to me, that's an intriguing thing to have on a first page, because that's a story of someone who's like in and out of hospitalization. And that's fascinating. How does one navigate that? There's a lot to unpack. And then the child says, Mama, why were you in the hospital? So keep in mind here, there's a lot of opportunity. She looked up at me with those big blue eyes, or brown eyes, or maybe she has a lock of hair falling in her face. There's opportunity here to tell us a little bit about what is this, what do these characters look like? I mean, you can even start to touch on things like race, like I don't know how you would, you want to start to get into specificity, even if it's just touches of culture, right? The fact that she calls her mama and not mommy, your father versus daddy. Daddy would be the one to ask, right? A lot of times people, when they're talking to kids, will say, daddy would be a better person to ask, depending on how old the kid is. So when you say your father, again, that reads as an older child. Like, I have teenagers, so I wouldn't be like, go ask daddy. I would say your father would know the answer to that. My kids are older, and since I'm kind of going with the assumption that this is a younger person, again, just these little details that can kind of hint at age and appearance and relationships. Right after you were born, I got what's called postpartum depression, meaning I got severely depressed. I might even take out meaning, and I would. She paused here and thought about how much to reveal to her my 8-year-old, right? Opportunity here to tell us how old she is. I got, because is an 8-year-old gonna understand severely depressed any more than postpartum depression? If you're talking to a young person, you might say, I got really sad, really sad. I was so sad. And I'm making the assumption of a younger child here. I wasn't able to care for you for a few months, and I stayed in a hospital for the first 2 months of your life. And I would, because you say 2 months here and a few months here, I would say I wasn't able to care for you. And I stayed in the hospital for the first 2 months of your life. Um, okay, so that's all we've got for this. Again, this is an intriguing story. I particularly with postpartum depression stories, I feel like they're such critical stories for us to tell, because when women experience it, they can feel very isolated and alone. So this is, I love where this is going. I would love to hear the rest of this story. I'm intrigued, but I would definitely, there's a little bit of fine tuning I would do in terms of how much can you hint at where are they in the world? What are they doing? How old is Tessa now, right? We get the sense that she has moved out because, well, I don't know, maybe she's a teenager. We just need to drop a few more hints in here as to like what's actually going on. And then we need to work on this transition from the idea of like, she told me something I'm not supposed to tell you. Oh, but she knows I'm going to tell you. And then how do you segue into, this wasn't the first, or this was, yeah, it's just a hard segue into Tess asking about what was I like as a baby. So yeah, a few things to consider there. I don't necessarily, not my story. I have to like let you make those decisions. But if you do have questions, you can drop them in the chat below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks for sending in your story, and I hope you continue with this one.